Pleasure and distinct honor to introduce two World War II veterans, Lieutenant J.G. Ray Owen, a Navy aviator, and Dr. John A. Clark, a lieutenant in the Army Air Corps, Air Force, B-17 pilot over Germany. The gentlemen, well, first off, I should say this program is being run under the auspices of the estimable Phil Larson. Phil, wave.
Underestimable.
And Amanda Schnitzer, wave. Please come on in. So, gentlemen, we need a volunteer. You never volunteer in the military, right? We need a volunteer to start. Tell us a little bit about your background and your initial service, and then we'll get into it.
Is this working? Well, I don't know where you want to start with this. We started as a young fellow. I just heard about the Naval Air Corps, decided I'd like to see what they had to offer, and by the time I got through finding out what they had to offer, they had me by a short hair. It took me about 4 days to get involved in the Navy. I went down on a Thursday, see what it was about. Friday, went back for a physical. Saturday went back for an eye exam. Sunday or Monday they said raise your right hand and repeat after me. And I was in the Navy. I left home in December of 42, excuse me. And I went through several bases. First base was to learn how to fly. Went to a small airfield down there in Asheville, North Carolina, and I got into fighter clubs. And after about 35 or 40 hours of fighter club and solo, they gave us a pair of wings, which I was very proud of, which meant absolutely nothing because they were war-trained service wings. They don't even have a mark on them. But they made us feel good, young people. And I went into the real Navy, spent about 3 months in ground school, and started going through the stages of learning to fly in the various planes available, such as the Navy trainer and the chairman, and you go from base to base and get a bigger and bigger plane. And I finally got to Corpus Christi, Texas. That's where I graduated, got my wings, after flying the SNB and then the SNJ, with the Army calls the 86 Texan. And I went from there to Opelika, Florida, got into dive bombers, the SBT, and I took a fighter syllabus in a dive bomber, which is a little bit difficult when it comes to gunnery, because it's hard to shoot a sleeve with using a palm sight for targeting. And I went from there up to Great Lakes, checked out on the Great Lakes and carrier landing, and went to Norfolk for a couple of 3 days, got assigned to a squadron, which happened to be up in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Went up there and they could put me in an F-6F. And you learn to fly them by the guy standing in the wing, he points out things in the cockpit, he says, there you are, have a good trip. There's no two-seaters that I know of. So you know, the first trip is your first solo in one of those. And I loved the aircraft. It was a sweetheart. It responded good, it was an easy one to handle. It was what I call a pilot's cockpit. Everything was within reach. You had elbow room. And I think that John may know about some of the fighters in the Army, like the Air Corps, I should say. They're smaller cockpits, they're inline engines, and they're smaller body shape. My aircraft was made for carrier landings. It's a bulkier body, heavier wings, and naturally it had more room in the cockpit. So they took advantage of it, and it was very comfortable. From there, I took my training, took a lot of training in airplane at Opelika, or at Cape Cod. And from there I shipped out to San Diego and then out to the Hawaiian Islands. I spent 3 months on Maui in training and some carrier landings. And then from there we went to Guam. I got aboard the ship, the USS Wasp CV-18. I got aboard that ship in Guam, and within a few days we were in the battle zone. We went from there, we went to the Philippines. We worked in and around the Philippines, up into Formosa, back down into the China Sea, worked along through strikes in Hong Kong, Canton, China, various places like that, and back out again. We used to listen to Tokyo Rose because she had all the modern music. And we had it on in the wardroom and in the evening. And when we first went into China Sea, she came on the air and she welcomed our air group, Air Group 81. She named the skipper of the air group. She named skippers of the three fighter groups, or the plane groups, the fighters, the torpedo bombers, and the dive bombers. And she said, welcome to the South Pacific, and we'll be waiting for you when you come out. And of course, we enjoyed the music and everything, but that gave us some concern.
Yeah.
We came out around 4 o'clock in the morning, everybody at general quarters, and we never saw anybody. The free passage coming out of there. And from there, we went up to, we flew our way up to the islands, and I had 3 strikes on Tokyo itself. And then we came back, went back down into the Philippines for a while, and eventually got back home. But one of the things that happened to me in the Philippines was we were out, there were 13 planes on a flight. I had number 6 on mine, I don't know why. And we were attacking the Japanese light cruiser sitting at anchor in one of the bays. And when I attacked it, pulling out, my wing got hit. And had quite a big hole in it. And I had flying wing on the skipper, so I called him, told him, and he said, well, you wait up here, we're going to make another attack, and then you can join up. So I watched my back while they were attacking this ship again, and as I pulled out, as they pulled out, I tried to catch up, and with the drag and everything, it took me about 15 minutes to get back in formation. About approximately 160 miles back to the fleet, and I landed the thing. On the way back, I'm thinking, what do I do now? Go up and stall it, see how it handles. You exercise your mind with these things. Actually, I didn't have a choice. We got back in there, we got in the echelon. Skipper, we dropped our hooks. The skipper gave me an up sign for my hook. I gave him an up sign for his hook. He broke off. I broke off behind him. He landed and I landed. And they took me right over the outboard elevator, took me down below deck into the hangar deck, and they took the wing off of the plane, photographed it, and threw it away. I've got a couple pictures of the wing that I brought back, and there's no reason to keep that wing because it was totally destroyed. But that aircraft flew pretty good. I flew back with full right rudder, full right stick, just to keep the wing level, more or less. And no real problem with landing. I didn't give it a thought. I just followed the landing signal officers' signals, and in essence, they fly the plane for you anyhow. If you reply to their signals, you don't have any trouble at all. They know where you are and how you are. They're all qualified in every aircraft they bring aboard anyhow. So basically, that's the thumbnail sketch. So, my experience in the Great War.
John?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Laurie. Ray. Ray and I are probably about the same age. I was born at the University Hospital here in Ann Arbor in 1923. Next July, I'll be 94 years old. The generation that I belong to, and so does Ray, was the first generation in America to be air-minded. You see, the heroes to those of us interested in aircraft were the flyers of the First World War. You've all heard of the Red Baron, of course, and Eddie Rickenbacker. Growing up in the 20s, we didn't make any distinction, in fact, that one was an enemy and one wasn't. They both were heroes to us. During my youth and childhood, as they would say, I think I made a model of every aircraft that was built between the First World War and 1942, when I went into the military myself. In fact, my mother would allow me to hang them from the ceiling. We lived in a small house in Royal Oak Township, and I can still see those aircraft hanging from the ceiling. Today, I don't suppose mothers would allow that, but in any event, I went from kit models to designing my own, to rubber band powered models, to models that had, I designed my own as well, that had little gasoline engines, and they would fly up the air, then they would glide, and the idea was to make them glide as long as you could. So you see, I grew up being absolutely thrilled with airplanes. That's air-mindedness. Charles Lindbergh was in that period, and the development of U.S. air transport was coming along about that same time. So airplanes were in the air, so to speak, in my mind too. I can remember walking to a little school, went to Parker School at 13 Mile on Woodward Avenue. Every morning, about 8:15, a Ford Trimotor would come right down Woodward Avenue, at about 1,500 feet, I suppose, and I think carrying passengers from Flint to Detroit. Later on, I learned that maybe that's the way they found Detroit, was to fly down Woodward Avenue.
Probably.
Or, Ray, you probably heard this one. We were cautioned never try to fly down a railroad track because you'll run head on into a Navy pilot trying to find his way home. That's true, Ray?
John, I never heard that one before. But it sounds good.
But I will confess,
As far as I follow roads.
after the war, I flew with the Air National Guard in Michigan in an AT-6, among other things, and B-26s. And one time, coming back from a flight to Boston, I ran out of fuel just west of Buffalo, New York. And I used a railroad track to find my way into London, Ontario. Yeah. So I thought of you at the time.
You didn't find a pilot, did you?
I had to dodge a few of them, but that's why they have yellow-colored airplanes. You know,
Right.
you see them. Well, so when the war came, even before the war, in junior high school, I wrote the papers on going to an air flight school and ultimately joining the Army Air Corps, which was called at the time. Flying out of Selfridge Field were the P-12, P-26, and the P-36 and the P-39, and they'd come roaring over our neighborhood because Royal Oak isn't very far. Certainly by P-39, it's about 3 or 4 minutes from Selfridge Field, and I would just almost drool at the mouth to see these aircraft. They had the stripes on the tail and the rondels on the wing, and they would fly low. Maybe they thought they were kind of generating interest because you could see the pilots wearing goggles in those days, and it was a big thrill. So when war came, I was a student at Lawrence Institute of Technology, but before that, I knew what I would do. I would hope, against hope, to get into the Army Air Corps. And so in 1942, that's what I did. I volunteered for Army Air Corps cadet training, and then just hoped that my application would be accepted and so on. I also had a first alternate appointment to the academy at West Point, and so the military had to figure out which one would come first, and so I wasn't called to active duty until February of '43. And then I became, at that time, just a GI private, carrying a rifle, but assigned to the Air Corps and ultimately go on through flight training, which I did, starting with a pre-flight at Santa Ana, California, where they figured out the best they could what you were useful for, pilot, navigator, or bombardier. Of course, I would only want to be pilot, which I was lucky enough to get, and then went through the 3 phases of Air Force pilot training. 29 pounds for the first aircraft, these little twin-wing Stearmans, one of the finest airplanes ever built, I thought. And to my first day of soloing that, I thought I was in heaven, and almost got there, I think, too. But then we went on to Merced, California for basic training and a little more advanced aircraft, more powerful, and then finally earn my wings at the Advanced Twin Engine Flying School at Stockton, California. Somewhere between Merced and Stockton in my training, the Air Force had decided that my class was destined for multi-engine. Those destined for fighter pilots went to another advanced flying school, single-engine school. We went on to multi-engine, well, 2-engine, Cessna Bobcats, we called them, the Bamboo Bomber. After getting my wings in April of 1944, that would be class 44D as in dog, like on the tail of this fortress here. Then I went on to B-17 training at Las Vegas, Nevada, where the greatest benefit I got from that was I met my future wife. She was a military pilot, was a WASP, and had about 1,000 hours in fighters, parachuted out in training, member of the Caterpillar Club, and so we had quite a lot in common. And I had a few other ideas as well, of course, but so we established a friendship, and after a year of overseas duty, we were then married in 1945 in Iowa. Last year, she was inducted into the Iowa Aviation Hall of Fame. Of course, I went for that, too. Well, after training at Las Vegas, getting used to the B-17, I went on to join a flight crew which was destined to become part of the American 8th Air Force stationed in England. And after a couple of months of training, I joined the crew as the co-pilot of that crew, and I was really lucky to get a very experienced 4-engine pilot as the pilot position of pilot, aircraft commander, who had 2,000 hours in both B-17s, this aircraft, and B-24s. And we trained for 2 months on 8th Air Force procedures. The 8th Air Force was made up of 4-engine heavy bombers. And do we want to get into those details now or wait for questions?
Well, I'll tell you what, audience, because it's after 2, many of you had lunch. Some of you might be close to taking a nap. Here's a pop quiz. And that pop quiz is, what University of Michigan student became one of the foremost engineering pioneers in the World War II and afterwards era in aviation? Come on, guys. Whoever answers this gets to ask the first question. Come on. Think, 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 think. Yes?
Kelly Johnson.
Yes, Lockheed Skunk Works. All right.
Good.
So, you get the first question. And of either one of these gentlemen. You can take a minute and formulate it, because I can ask a question.
Go ahead, ask the question.
All right, Ray.
Why don't you give us the answer, then we'll form a question for you.
Ray, what's your best day in the air? Your best day at the controls of an airplane?
I don't know how you'd answer that. I'd say every day was a good day when you're in an aircraft.
He's not a recruiter. Excellent. And John?
Well, I'm often asked what was my best mission or worst mission. The question cannot really be answered because there's so many other factors. We crash landed in Belgium. I suppose the best hour of my life was when I crawled out of the airplane and it was still in more or less one piece and was not on fire. As a cadet, my best day was probably the first day I soloed in a Stearman bi-wing aircraft. Every mission is so different from the previous one. We'll describe some, and I'll pick up at that point. After our training in Tennessee for 8th Air Force procedures, which is very involved, because we fly in formation, you have to learn formation flying and real close formation. We then picked up a new aircraft in Nebraska and then flew it from Nebraska to England. We were our own ferry pilots, doing what Colonel Lindbergh had done about 12 years before. And I always I thought, remarkable at how little he had to go with, whereas we had, in that day, and it's better today, of course, we had remarkable instrumentation and very good equipment. Our flight was unremarkable. It took about 13 hours to cross from Labrador to Iceland, where we first landed, and then flew down to England and were shipped to, in September, early September of 1944, to East Anglia, which is a region north of London, northeast, like a thumb, pointing out somewhat like an arrow towards Germany. There were 45 heavy bomber groups in that area and about 15 fighter groups, all part of the 8th Air Force. We were sent to what we learned shortly after we got there as the 100th Bomb Group. And the officer that greeted us said, "Welcome to the 100th Bomb Group. We are known in the 8th Air Force as the Bloody Hundred." A name they earned by being not very good pilots, I think. In the early stages of the war, they lost squadrons of 12 at a time. While I was there, we lost squadrons of 12 twice. And the reason I was there is because they lost 12 aircraft in Czechoslovakia just a week before, and we were replacement crews joining the Bloody Hundred. I have written all this up in my war memoirs, and to go into a lot of detail would take perhaps the rest of this week, but we won't do that. But a few things that may be important to you to know is that I flew in the winter of 1944-45, and we flew in the period when, and we take off in the early hours of the morning, absolutely dark, in rain, sleet, snow, clouds 100 feet off the ground, and we would take off every 30 seconds, one aircraft after another. We had a crew of 10. We'd have 8,000 pounds of bombs in the bomb bay, and almost 3,000 gallons of fuel in the wings. Every now and then someone didn't make it, and under those conditions they would end up at the end of the runway in a big ball of fire. When an aircraft crashes with fuel in it, inevitably there's a fire because the wreckage is so extreme and the engines are so hot that the fuel in the engines, fuel ignited by the engines. But anyway, we would take off when we could only see 2 runway lights ahead of us. And that was just quite normal. We didn't think much about that. 30 seconds apart, we'd take off into the black darkness, and then as soon as we were off the ground, we had a procedure because there were 500 aircraft within 10 miles of us doing exactly the same thing. We would field 1,000 to 2,000 heavy bombers in a mission, and so the English airspace was crowded. But we had procedures, fly straight out for 3 minutes, and in fact, near us, north of our field, was a B-24 field, and we had flight separation just on the basis that the Fortress would gain altitude faster than the B-24s, and many a time I'd look down and here be a B-24 100 feet below us, but we didn't collide. We were separated by that particular feature of both aircraft. And then we make a standard right turn to the left and fly out into hopefully free air, still in clouds, still on instruments, until we got to a flight altitude perhaps above 12,000 feet, and then hook on to our lead ship, which would be flying up there, flashing a yellow Altus lamp from the tail of the aircraft with the Morse code letter D, ja, dit, and that was how we identified aircraft from our group. And then in the next 3 hours, the aircraft would go to squadron formation, a flight formation of 3 aircraft, squadron of 12, 3 squadrons to a group of about 26 aircraft, and then when that was formed, it would then find a wing, we joined 2 other groups, and then head out at about maybe 15,000 feet towards Europe. That was the beginning of every mission. The missions last about 8 hours, and we had some missions that were not very difficult, and others that were hell incarcerated, with aircraft blowing up and so on. Mostly heavily defended oil refineries in that part of the war. When we finished the mission, or when we finished bombing, we would assemble as a group, by the way, at a point 30 miles from the target, and then 8th Air Force procedures were to fly straight and level for the next 30 miles or so. So the lead bombardier and lead navigator, the navigator could confirm the location, and the lead bombardier would adjust his bomb sight accordingly. Because in those days, every aircraft didn't bomb separately. The 8th Air Force, we bombed as a squadron or as a group. And so the lead ship would have 4 smoke bombs under the wing, and when the lead bombardier agreed that the bomb should be released, the smoke bombs would go out, and the rest of us would just drop our bombs, throw a switch. We didn't use bombardiers at all on the last, most of the time I was there, except in lead ships and deputy lead off to the right. In case the lead ship got hit, then the deputies take over, and that happened much more often than you would expect. So on the 20-minute bomb run, I felt like the British cavalry in the Crimean War, who rode into the Russian guns at Balaclava. And we had to fly straight and level, and no way of trying to dodge because you couldn't get the bombs where they're supposed to go. And as our colonel reminded us, if you don't get the bombs on the target, there's no point even leaving. So we flew through this flat corridor, and on some missions, everyone got hit. Some seriously, some not so, but every aircraft got hit when you're flying through flak, because it's an explosive shell, usually 88 millimeters in diameter, in 4 guns together on the ground, forming a diamond shape, and throwing millions of pieces of steel at high speed right amongst the formation.